You're about to watch a video that's an excerpt of one of my online courses, free sample if you will. If you enjoy it, please get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and let me know what you think. Alrighty, so if any of you are struggling to identify unhelpful frames, there's some I want to share with you that I've commonly seen throughout my years as a coach and in my own life before that as well, and even in my own life currently. Let's face it, we always have some unhelpful frame going on. So you might resonate with some of these if you struggle to find some of your own, or this might prompt you to think of ones that didn't occur to you yet. Number one, a good life is all about constant achievements and results and recognition. So somebody has this frame is constantly focused on the evidence of how well they're doing, usually in comparison to others or in comparison to some sort of unit of measurement, standard that society has set. The high achiever might have this kind of frame. So all they do is look at how they can beat the next person or score more points or get more people to like them. And it's always more and better and faster and stronger and always trying to win, essentially. Or at least that's the evidence they focus on. And if they're a so-called loser, they're somebody who struggles but still has this frame, they'll focus on how they fail to meet these standards and how they constantly lose and so on. And the narratives will be about good enough. It will be about who's the best and what it means to be a good person and who has value and who doesn't, all based on those achievements. The person with the most achievements is the most valuable person. The person with the least is the least. And those are the kinds of stories that come up. Now, the reason I list this as an unhelpful frame is because for most people, this either leads to burnout or depression. If they're a high achiever, they can always find a way to be better, so they're never satisfied. And if they're a low achiever, they can always find somebody who's doing better than them and constantly feel like they're not good enough. So either way, you kind of lose with this kind of frame. If instead you were to focus, for example, on how well you're living with your own integrity, as well as having the humility to understand that you're a human being who will make mistakes, not only are you likely to succeed, but you're likely to enjoy the process along the way without any unnecessary or unhelpful comparison with other people. Number two, authority figures are wiser than I am and should be obeyed. You'll know you have this frame if you're constantly focused on the hierarchy of society, who to listen to and who to ignore. And you give certain preference or respect to people simply because of data points that don't actually have any meaning, like age or wealth or social proof, how much other people like them. So if you ever get nervous about seeing the CEO of the company walking through your office or seeing a celebrity in public, you'll know that you have this frame, this idea that you must bow down to certain people who outrank you. You'll also notice that it goes the other way. There'll be certain people who you see yourself as outranking, like the homeless guy or the needy, creepy person at the office or whatever, and you'll ignore them and you'll give them less attention, less kindness, less resources. So the narratives may be subtle, but they'll be there, like he's famous, so he must be special, or he's the boss, so he must be smarter than me, or he's homeless, so he must be a loser. There's these kind of cause and effect relationships, and you're really focused on those evidence points, those small, vague pieces of data that tell you how people are ranked in society. Now, the reason this is an unhelpful frame should actually be quite obvious. It's because those data points are not reliable sources of information about how valuable a person is. Somebody can easily climb the company ladder without being a person of value. They can do so through deceptive or manipulative means, whilst the janitor, who's been a janitor for 30 years, might be the best, most loyal, respectable person you've ever met. I'm not saying that that's always the case, but that evidence that you're focusing on doesn't give you the accurate picture. It's amazing how often people bow down to authority, somebody wearing a police uniform or somebody who's simply older than them, and yet we've seen throughout human history how this has been abused. Look at what happened with the Nazis. That's an example of people bowing down just because someone's wearing a uniform, yet some of those people wearing uniforms were genocidal maniacs. So obviously, your perception of someone's authority is not an accurate measure of their worth or value, kindness, compassion, respectability, responsibility, and so on. One way I like to look at it is a king doesn't need to tell you he's king. So if someone's flaunting the fact that they have authority over you, all that tells you is they probably shouldn't have authority over you. Thirdly, another frame that's kind of common and similar to the ones I've already mentioned is that people I'm attracted to are better than me. You'll know you have this one if you get nervous around people you're attracted to, or you behave differently in their presence as you would to someone whom you have no attraction to. Now, the data points will depend on what you find attractive. Maybe it's the way they look, maybe it's the way they smell, maybe it's their behavior, their sense of humor, whatever you're attracted to. Whatever it is that you notice and you go, oh, and you get nervous, or you start showing off or anything like that. You start changing your behavior simply because you've become attracted to them. Now, the story you'll tell yourself is something that justifies that change in behavior. Like, I should be nervous because she's hot, or I should try and get his attention because he's hot. This idea that you're allowed to change who you are as a person and should do simply because you feel physical attraction towards them. Right? That kind of justification of foregoing your integrity. Now, I believe this is an unhelpful frame for the same reason as the one I mentioned previously. Just because someone is physically attractive does not give you any accurate information about their value and about the ability that you will have to connect with them. Often we're blinded by the things we're attracted to, and we miss out on great opportunities with other people who we would actually build up an attraction towards if only we could get to know them. There are times when people who simply look good get lenient sentences in court for horrific acts. There's a lot of studies to show this, that basically the better looking someone is, the more they get away with. That doesn't mean that they're better people, but it does show you that we all, nearly all of us, have this biased frame. So sometimes another way to look at it is, if I were blind, how would I judge people differently? And you might notice that with that new frame, things would be catastrophically different. Another common frame is the I'm not good enough story. I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I never do well, I'm not good enough. For some people it's permanent. They take it with them wherever they go. Now, the evidence points are really obvious. You're always focused on what you're not doing well, what you failed in, what other people are doing better than you, how unlucky you are, and so on. You're constantly focused on the points of your life that you think are painful, and especially the ones that you cause through your own ineptness or lack of skill or lack of attractiveness or whatever. The stories you tell yourself are usually those that kind of justify the unlucky vibe. Like, I'm disadvantaged, I don't have what other people have, I was born wrong or destroyed in childhood in some way, or I am somehow less than other people. That's often the narrative that comes up. I shouldn't really have to say why I think this is an unhelpful frame, but I would like to say how inaccurate it is. I won't go into details here, but odds are if you see yourself this way, you have to really skew the information to make it true. You have to ignore all of your achievements. Like I say in one of my podcasts about this, you have to ignore the fact that you're well and healthy and smart enough to be watching this course. If you're there, how could you be not good enough? The evidence doesn't line up. So you've had to ignore everything you've done well, and that's a majority of things, and focus on just a few things that were points of soreness for you, even though you survived them. Anybody out there who has the not good enough frame is lying to themselves. Another common frame, hard work is good, or busyness is good. The kind of people who brag about being busy or constantly looking for something to do or constantly make work and life harder for themselves. Now, the evidence points is usually on quantity achieved, is how much can you do or how busy are you in any second of the day. So somebody has this frame, finds it very uncomfortable to relax or to chill out and heal and rest and recover. They must be constantly doing stuff. And when they're not doing stuff, they feel a sense that they're somehow failing. And the narrative they tell themselves is something along the lines of busy is good, it's productive, that the more you do, the better you are as a person. This is usually one of those inherited frames we're taught it, usually by our parents or the culture that we're brought up in. This idea that the harder you work, the more you're contributing. It's a weird one because if you just take another second to look, you'll see that's so not true. That some of the most productive people in society have relaxed, casual lives, while some of the busiest do very little to help us. Now, the reason I think this is an unhelpful frame is because it's an untruthful one. To be productive is not about busyness, it is about wisdom. It's about knowing what small action has the biggest impact. The wisest people do very little to have a huge impact on the world, while the busiest people usually actually only have an average impact on the world. They do very little good. They're too busy to do anything well. Whereas the people who do a few things but do them to an excellent level are the ones who provide the most value to themselves and to society. Another common unhelpful frame, basically, health is difficult. This idea that exercising, eating well is a difficult chore. And there's always a focus on the pieces of evidence based on effort, how long it takes you to get to the gym, how heavy the weights are, how much hassle it is to put on your running gear or buy climbing equipment, how much it costs, how difficult it is to go shopping and learn how to cook and all the meal preparation. There's a big focus on the effort. It makes it sound like health is a hassle. We can see marketing work with this. It makes the unhealthy options as easy as possible. Fast food, sitting on the couch, kind of highlights that health is hard and being unhealthy is easy. And the narrative really just clearly goes along with the evidence. It'll take a long time. I don't have time for this. It's too hard. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fit enough. People will laugh at me, on and on and on. This kind of focus on just how hard it is, this justification for not doing it because it's just too much work. Again, it should be obvious as to why I think this is an unhelpful frame. It's going to kill you. There's this kind of frame that causes heart disease and injuries and just general low health and resorting to binging on sugars and drugs and alcohol. It should be kind of obvious why this is a dangerous frame. It's also an inaccurate one. Once you actually get up to a baseline of living healthy, it's easier to be healthy than it is to be unhealthy, especially as time goes by. Any research will show you that somebody suffering from heart disease and obesity has a life more full of effort than somebody who's eating clean and exercising regularly. So the idea that health is harder than being unhealthy is simply untrue. And finally, the last frame I want to cover that I think is unhelpful is that idea that comparison to others is somehow helpful for you, right? Other people are more confident than I am, or other people are less skilled at writing than I am, or how fat am I compared to my friends? There's this constant push to how do I do compared to others? And the narrative, subtle as it may be, is often around how this is a good idea. It helps you know how good you are as a person, how well you're doing. The idea that comparing to others is some reliable piece of measurement, one that you need to do well in. Now, the reason I think this is an unhelpful frame is simply because it's proven to be. There are very few people who compare themselves to others and say that they have a high quality of life, while the opposite is often true. People who just focus on themselves and living by their own set of core principles or values find it very easy to find a high quality of life compared to those who are constantly comparing themselves to others. So there's kind of the proof is in the pudding. In my experience as a coach, I've found that people who compare themselves to others often suffer often, almost without exception, whereas the opposite is true as well. People who don't compare themselves to others and focus on another measurement of standards tend to enjoy their life a lot more. I want you to open your mind how skewed that frame is, because it all comes down to who you choose to compare yourself to and what points of data you choose to compare. And that makes it very difficult. There are 7.5 billion people out there in the world, and I doubt you're comparing yourself to all of them. No, you select a few to compare yourself to. If you're an arrogant, narcissistic type person, you'll compare yourself to people you think are doing worse than you and points of data where you see yourself doing better than they are. And of course, if you're someone who struggles with confidence, you're going to be constantly looking for someone who's doing better than you and compare yourself to the points of data where they succeed. You'll notice you ignore the other data. For example, there might be a guy at your office who makes more money than you, and that's all you can think about, and yet he's in a miserable relationship at home, whereas you get on well with your partner. You don't compare that point of data, you just compare the money. You'll notice that. Almost anyone you compare yourself to, you have to ignore any other point in their life where you're winning, or where you're the same, or where you're losing if you're arrogant. You kind of select out anything else that's relevant just so you can constantly tell yourself the story like, I'm doing worse than others. A common one I notice, especially among females who have weight problems, is they're constantly looking at the girls who are skinnier than they are, ignoring the fact that most of the time, with the world like 45% obese at the moment, they're actually in the top 10% of skinny girls, even if there are girls who are thinner than they are. But that's what I mean about the selection of evidence. They only look to someone who's doing better without realizing why is she doing better. Maybe she's skinnier because she has cancer. Maybe she's skinnier because it's genetic. Maybe she's actually unhealthy and has low muscle tone. They don't think about any of that. They just go, her size is smaller than mine. That makes me a loser. So I want you to notice, if you think about these frames and the ones that you identified earlier on, that you're skewing your perspective. You're telling yourself a story about the world that's very biased, that ignores nearly all the evidence and doesn't help you. So you need to start thinking about, why do I keep insisting on seeing the world this way when it's clearly wrong and I'm getting nothing out of it? Are you a nice guy or people pleaser who wishes they were more assertive, more honest, and better respected by others? Since 2013, I've been helping people just like you discover their integrity and apply it courageously to build deep and meaningful connections, get respected by others, and become the confident person you've always wanted to be. Imagine being able to speak your mind without worrying what other people will think or worrying that it's the right thing to say, and being able to assertively stand up for yourself and your loved ones. Imagine never feeling the need to apologize for who you are or what you want, and being able to live carefree without shame or the I'm not good enough story in your head. Imagine going to bed knowing that you courageously took every opportunity available to you and you've got no regrets because you always know what you should be doing in every situation. I'm so confident in my ability to help people like you unleash your highest level of self-worth that I give people a free coaching session to test what I'm doing. In this 1-hour session, we will uncover the biggest barrier to your confidence, whether it's an awareness problem, you don't know what you should be doing differently, or it's a courage problem, you know what you should be doing, but you find it too intimidating. I will guide you to make a breakthrough with your behavior to get through that barrier in a powerful way without feeling terrified and without destroying everything you love. I've had some people find this first session so powerful that I never hear from them again, simply because they didn't need anything more after that. It launched them into the highest level of confidence that they've ever experienced. And if that's the result you get, I'm good with that. One client put it, this session was more valuable to me than 3 years of therapy combined. So if you're tired of trying to keep everybody happy, and you're sick of worrying what other people think of you, and you're concerned that your people-pleasing and conflict avoidance is going to damage your relationships, then come and have a talk with me. Worst case scenario, you get to experience what it's like to talk with someone who actually understands what it's like to be you. I've lived the nice guy experience for decades. I know it inside and out. I know that pain. Case scenario, and very likely, you will have such a powerful insight into a behavioral change that you can make in the next 24 hours to significantly improve your confidence, relationships, and career. All I ask is that you be honest, open to change, and willing to try something new. Why wait another 10 years to discover confidence when you can do it today? Fill out the brief form below to apply for a trial coaching session. And do this quickly because there are limited spots each month. And then I'll get back to you to book in a time to talk.